It's a funny thing about hope. It can't help but inspire and ignite and excite. Thank you, Eve, for sharing your story. For Justin, thank you. And for Peter for being a part of sharing the stories today. I'm going to skip a couple things and not say some thank yous because we kind of got I want to get you out on time, and I'm telling you it's not going to be easy. I'm going to talk really fast like this. So, but I do want to say just have the staff and board stand up real quick, because that is critical path in order to pursue this vision and mission, is to have committed, competent, caring people that do it every day. Please, board and staff, stand up. Help me thank them. Give a person a fish, you've heard it said, and you feed them for a day. Teach that person to fish and you feed them for a lifetime. My friends, that is an incomplete line of BS. Because what E has realized, what Peter has enjoyed, and what Justin is fighting for is not just to get more free fish, nor is it just to become really good fishermen. It's to own and to help own a piece of waterfront property, because the best fishermen in the world can be denied access to the pond and end up starving to death. E went from fighting not to be defined by her environment to defining her environment. Peter assumed his ability to define his environment, which is often one of the privileges that we get as people with whiteness and maleness. But found that as he opens himself up to the environment around him, to the Miss Naomis of the world, that it changes his definitions and his lines of sight, and it ultimately changes his actions, and he likes who he becomes. Let me take a step back for a moment and introduce myself. I am Sheila's husband. I am Sam, Joe, and Kate's dad. I am a recovering Constantinian Christian. I am Jan and Wayne's son. I am a neighbor in North Minneapolis. I am white-skinned. I am middle-ish class. I am able-bodied, I am heterosexual, I am male, and I am a benefactor of a whole pile of privileges just because I am. I get granted access to the pond, and sometimes even specific parts of the pond just because I am. I am getting more and more conscious about how these privileges continue to perpetuate and exacerbate disparities between me and my neighbor. I am beginning to see. And I am seeing enough to do something about it. I am not crippled by guilt. I am motivated. I am investing my life into being a solution, taking the unconscious liability of blind privilege and converting it through the fires of solidarity and kinship into a conscious asset towards transformative change. And I am here to invite you to join me. Last year, you might not remember, but I talked a little bit about growth. And that urban homers, we would not grow for the sake of growth, but out of a response to the voices that are screaming in our ears, screaming dreams and desires and demands. I don't know about you, but I'm finding out that very few times in my life so far has growth ever felt really good in the moment. What growth requires of me is to examine and exhume and oftentimes illuminate those dark, unlit corners of my soul. What growth requires of me is to hand that lamp over and allow the people around me to shine that and flicker that light into those dark, unlit corners, or they will never see the light. And then what growth demands is for me to make a decision to pretend I didn't see what I just saw, and to cower away in arrogant self-denial, or to pray to God for the courage to engage what I just saw and allow it to change me, because what gets illuminated hardly ever reconciles with what I thought I would find there. I choose courage. And the reason I choose courage and change is not because it's easy. And it's not because it feels good, and it's not only because it's the right thing to do, or only because it's the moral thing to do, or the ethical thing to do. I choose it because the intoxicating taste of transformation towards betterness that comes with every relationship reconciled, every life liberated, and every day dignified through mutually beneficial, kindred relationships is burned onto the palate of my soul. And I can't go back. I am hooked. And it's this kind of growth that I understand the hope we aspire to perpetuate is like. It is so compelling. It is so intoxicating. It is so liberating that I want you to taste it too, and to continue to drink deeply from it, to courageously march shoulder to shoulder together to change the world, one you and one me at a time. Over the past 14 years, that little flicker of light in the hands of my neighbor has illuminated some surprising revelations. One of the surprising revelations that it's illuminated is how economic the gospel is. John Huey says we read the gospels as though we have no money, and then we spend our money as though we know nothing of the gospel. My privilege, my blindness, my unconsciousness, my lack of proximity all enable disparities, not hope. Here's a couple disparities to think about. You heard about the jobs disparity along racial lines. 5.8% of the housing in North Minneapolis is more vacant than the rest of the city. That equals 677 units more vacant. If I attach the average income of Northside to those units, there's $22 million that does not come into my neighborhood because those units are vacant. $22 million. If we add up the average income in the city, or the disparity of average income in North Minneapolis, it's $13,000 less than the rest of the city. We put those two things together, and about $163 million a year does not come into North Minneapolis because of those disparities. That is what disparity looks like. It's $132 million in Phillips, $87 million in Frogtown, $70 million in the East Side. Between these four neighborhoods, $453 million every year does not flow into our neighborhoods because of the disparity. There is a deep risk of despair in every disparity, and the hope of Jesus, as I understand it, stands diametrically opposed to despair. Urban Homeworks is not a housing organization. We are a community building and community development organization that perpetuates the hope by promoting playgrounds of proximity and propinquity. We just happen to find that housing, strategic neighboring, and being conscious about who benefits from the inevitable economic exchanges that happens serve as great playgrounds. And to put another way, serve as great tables for deep exchange. The point of this event today is to reenact an old story where, and it's this old story, the Zacchaeus story in the Bible, where Bartimaeus the blind man, who can now see, follows Jesus to the house of Zacchaeus, who climbs a tree in an attempt to see. You remember? Jesus And Bartimaeus brings sight into the house of Zacchaeus, and upon seeing the disparity between himself and Bartimaeus, he is compelled in his soul to close that gap and pledges 1/2 of all he has and 4 times what he's taken wrongly. And you remember what Jesus says in that story? Salvation has come to this household today. Not just to you, Bart, or not just to you, Zach, but when this kind of thing happens, we all get to taste this kind of salvation. Jesus is talking about when the abundant and the scarce start to see one another across the many domains of our abundance and scarcity, which are not, frankly, all economic, but they are certainly economic, and recognize that we all have something to give. But probably more importantly, we all have something to receive. Urban Homeworks is this table. It's a table. Like the table in that story where we gather together to recover our sight, to engage in what is revealed, to grapple with those dark, unlit corners of our souls, to courageously grow, to be changed, and to taste the intoxicatingly transformative flavor that Zacchaeus and Bartimaeus and Jesus tasted those many years ago. It's to that end, I invite you to this playground, I invite you to this table, to pull up a chair, and if your chair's already here, belly up a little closer. And so it's at this moment that I need you to take out those cards that are on your tables and to begin filling them out. And in a minute, I'm going to give you a really awkward silence to do it into, so it'll be fun. And Lauren's going to come up and walk through the details. We are actually running late today, so if you have to leave, God bless you. Thank you for coming. But I encourage you to stay. And I'll tell you this little story as Lauren walks up. About 4 years ago, a few of us were going through the envelopes after this event, and the most powerful thing happened. We were down to the last 2 envelopes. The first one was opened up, and a $40,000 check was pulled out, and the box was checked, my company will match. The next one was opened, and 13 $1 bills were pulled out. We cried. The holy mix. The exchange is that we all have something to give and we all have something to receive. There are people in the room today that have the ability to write that $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 check, and you need to. We need you to do exactly that, about 4 or 5 of you. And some can only place a few $1 bills in that envelope. And it is to you that I pledge myself. It's to you that I am responsible, and it is to you that I am accountable. The resources raised today goes towards growth. Why grow? In the literature, it says there's 371 people on our waiting list. It's not true. There are 462 households on our waiting list right now whose humanity is being compromised. And there are people in this room who have the ability to respond. That means we have a responsibility. And what we do with that responsibility is a reflection of our own humanity. We all have the ability to be more human. This is one of the tables we get to sit across from each other and grapple with that. Our goal is to raise $350,000 today to increase the depth and breadth of our responsiveness to the voices in our ears for hope, not despair.